Tensions are rising between China and the Philippines. There are spy arrests, confrontations in the South China Sea, and war of words over Taiwan.
In 1898, during the Spanish-American War, the Philippines, with its 7,000 islands, became a natural fortress. Big fleets could not move in open seas. They were trapped in narrow straits, shallow waters, and tight choke points. More than 100 years later, that same geography is now a big problem for China. Even with the world's largest navy, Beijing cannot escape the island traps of the Philippines. For the Filipino people, this is not just about maps. It is about survival. Long ago, guerrilla fighters resisted foreign colonizers with courage and grit. Now their descendants stand with modern weapons and strong allies. But the big question is, can China's huge fleet really defeat the Philippines' growing defenses and global alliances? Picture this: BrahMos missiles hidden in Palawan, US jets landing in Luzon, Filipino sailors training with Japanese destroyers, all ready to hold back Beijing. If you live in the Philippines, this is not just strategy. This is about your homeland's future. In the next few minutes, we'll show why China may not win against the Philippines. This is the story of the secret strengths that could turn the tide against a superpower. The Philippines is not one big piece of land. It is a maze of more than 7,000 islands spread across the sea. Each island is like a natural barrier. Together, they form the country's first true shield. For any invader, this geography is a nightmare. The sea is cut into narrow straits, shallow channels, and twisting passages. The Luzon Strait is one of the busiest and most dangerous. Here, foreign ships must pass through narrow waters where they can be easily spotted and targeted. In the south, the Sulu Sea is another choke point. Control it, and you control the movement of fleets between the Pacific and the South China Sea. Then there is Palawan, a long island guarding the western flank. Its coasts and inlets can hide missiles, ships, and defenses. Every island is more than just land. It can become a battlefield. Local fighters, marines, and allies can use these choke points to slow down even the largest fleet. This is where size becomes a weakness for China. With the world's largest navy, Beijing commands hundreds of ships. But in narrow waters, those numbers turn into a crowd. Harder to move, harder to protect, and easier to attack. The Philippines' geography flips China's advantage into a problem. This is why geography has always been the first true shield of the Philippines. But geography alone cannot win a modern war. So what gave the Philippines its second shield? Its modern weapons? After World War II, the Philippines stood at a dangerous crossroads. It was a small nation, newly free, but exposed to bigger powers in Asia. That changed in 1951, when the United States and the Philippines signed the Mutual Defense Treaty. This was not just words on paper, it was a promise of alliance. The treaty said that if Philippine forces, ships, or planes were attacked, the US would come to their defense. Any attack in the Pacific against one side would be treated as an attack on both. For the Philippines, this was game-changing. A small archipelago was now backed by the world's strongest superpower. For ordinary Filipinos, it gave a sense of security, that their homeland would not stand alone. For enemies, it was a warning. Any strike against the Philippines risked war with the United States. This treaty became a shield as real as missiles or warships. It gave Manila deterrence, the power to stop aggression before it even began. Because behind every Filipino soldier stood the weight of American power. And Beijing knows it. Every move in the South China Sea comes with the shadow of US involvement. China's massive fleet cannot ignore that war here risks clashing with a nuclear superpower. But treaties are only one part of defense. When pressure from China spiked in the 2010s, the Philippines needed more than paper promises. It needed new weapons, new alliances, and stronger resolve. So how did Manila answer when Beijing pushed harder in the 2010s? In 2012, the struggle over the South China Sea hit a breaking point. That year, China seized Scarborough Shoal, only 120 nautical miles from Luzon. Chinese ships blockaded the waters, pushing out Filipino fishermen who had worked there for generations. For many in the Philippines, this moment was a painful reminder of how vulnerable their nation had become. But 4 years later, in 2016, a historic decision changed the story. At The Hague, an international tribunal rejected China's 9-Line claim. The court ruled that Beijing had no historic rights to the sea beyond what international law allowed. On paper, this was a clear legal victory for the Philippines. The world now had proof that China's sweeping claims were invalid, but the pressure at sea only grew. Chinese ships stayed in disputed waters. Chinese islands continued to expand with military runways and missile sites. So the Philippines could not stop at court wins alone. Manila realized that the time for simple coastal policing was over. What was needed now was true deterrence. The government began to rethink its military. No longer would the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, be limited to old patrol boats and second-hand planes. From 2012 to 2016, the shift began. The Philippines started moving toward missiles, modern warships, and stronger alliances. It was a turning point. From legal arguments to building hard power. But that raises the next question. What did the AFP modernization program actually deliver to the Philippine military? The Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, began its real transformation through the Horizon Modernization programs. Step by step, new funding pushed the military from old second-hand gear to modern weapons. The first big change came with missile-armed frigates like the Jose Rizal class, able to fire surface-to-air and surface-to-surface missiles. Next came the coastal BrahMos batteries placed along key islands like Palawan, ready to stop any invading fleet with supersonic strikes. The AFP also invested in ISR networks, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. With drones, radar, and satellites, the Philippines could see threats earlier and guide its defenses with precision data. Then came modern air defenses designed to protect bases, cities, and critical sites from missile or air attack. Together, these tools created a new kind of power. Not a huge navy, not hundreds of jets, but a layered shield of deterrence. The strategy was simple: fight small and smart, not large and symmetric. Instead of trying to match China's massive fleet ship for ship, the Philippines built a system to hit hard, hide, and survive. A weaker fleet no longer meant a defenseless nation. Every missile, every sensor, every partner turned the islands into a thorn in Beijing's plans. But weapons alone are not enough. True strength also comes from practicing with allies. So what happens when Filipino soldiers, sailors, and pilots train side by side with the US, Japan, and Australia? In 2014, the Philippines and the United States signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA. At first, it was just a legal framework, but by the mid-2020s, it had become a real military network. Through EDCA, U.S. forces began rotating through Philippine bases across the country. This meant not permanent U.S. bases, but shared access. Troops, planes, and equipment could move in and out with speed. From Luzon in the north to Palawan in the west, Filipino and American forces trained side by side. They rehearsed rapid reinforcement, moving jets, ships, and soldiers exactly where they would be needed in a real crisis. For the Philippines, this turned local bases into global links. Every facility could suddenly host Allied firepower. But it was never just about America. Over the next decade, Japan increased naval visits and even began discussing joint patrols. Australia expanded training missions, with troops landing for amphibious drills. Even India, once distant, began cooperating through naval exercises and defense talks. For China, this was the nightmare scenario. It was no longer just facing the Philippine military. It was facing a coalition of allies rehearsing together on Philippine soil. One island could host US jets. Another could stage Japanese destroyers. Another could welcome Australian or Indian forces. This web of cooperation meant any conflict in the South China Sea risked drawing in half the Indo-Pacific. Weapons can stop ships, but coalitions can stop wars before they even begin. So how do these growing alliances complicate China's war plans in the region? Before we reveal why China might not win, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Alliances now matter most. By 2025, the Philippines is no longer training alone. Manila now drills with Japan, Australia, India, and even partners from Europe. This is more than just ships sailing together. It is the building of a true coalition web. Shared intelligence links radars, satellites, and patrols across the Indo-Pacific. Cyber defense units work together to block hacking and electronic attacks. Sea lane protection plans are tested, ensuring vital trade routes stay open even in conflict. For China, this means every encounter at sea is more complex. A Chinese ship no longer faces just a Filipino frigate. It may face a US destroyer, a Japanese submarine, or an Australian frigate operating in the same waters. Even India, though far, is ready to back the Philippines with naval exercises and base access in the Indian Ocean. This web changes the risk. A strike on the Philippines is not just a strike on one small country. It could trigger a coalition response, pulling in multiple nations at once. Every drill, every patrol, every shared radar makes China's plans harder to execute. The coalition web multiplies Philippine power far beyond its own numbers. It forces Beijing to weigh not only the Philippine Navy, but the combined strength of its allies. But coalitions are only one side of the story. To see the full picture, we must also ask, what limits does China carry into this fight? For all of China's size and power, it carries real limits into any fight with the Philippines. Yes, the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, is the largest in the world, but its ships are stretched thin across many missions. China must watch the Taiwan Strait, patrol the East China Sea, guard the Indian Ocean routes, and now reach farther into Africa and the Middle East. This means that its power is wide but not always deep. Far sea projection, the ability to fight far from home, remains largely untested. Unlike the US Navy, which has fought wars and kept global presence for decades, Beijing's fleet has little real combat experience. Then there is the economy. China faces a slowdown at home, debt problems, and weaker growth. War in the South China Sea would not only cost billions, it would risk global trade, scaring investors and hurting Chinese exports. And diplomacy matters too. If Beijing attacked the Philippines, it would not just fight an island nation. It would invite international backlash and strengthen US-led coalitions in Asia. Even allies of China might step back to avoid getting trapped in sanctions or economic punishment. So here lies the twist. Even a superpower like China must weigh risks it cannot fully control. Numbers alone do not guarantee victory, and firepower does not erase diplomatic, economic, and geographic limits. So what is the one constant, the decisive factor, that explains why China might not truly win against the Philippines? The story of the Philippines has always been the story of resistance. When Spain ruled the islands, Filipino guerrillas rose from the mountains and jungles, refusing to be broken. When Japan invaded in World War II, Filipinos fought again, this time with both courage and sacrifice. Even in the darkest times, the Filipino spirit never gave up. That same willpower is still alive today. But now, it is joined with modern tools and powerful allies. A society forged by resistance is not easily conquered. For every Filipino, defense is not only about territory. It is about identity, history, and honor. This is where China faces its greatest problem. Yes, Beijing can bring massive numbers of ships, planes, and soldiers, but numbers cannot crush the spirit of a people who have resisted every empire that came before. From the mountains of Luzon, to the jungles of Mindanao, to the islands of the Visayas, history shows the same truth. Filipinos always fight back. This is why even with its superpower size, China cannot expect an easy victory. Because the Philippines' greatest strength is not just its geography, not just its allies, and not just its weapons. It is not about matching ships one for one. It is about making invasion nearly impossible. The maze of 7,000 islands creates natural traps. Every narrow strait, every hidden shore, and every coastal battery makes China's size work against it. Then there are the alliances. Through the Mutual Defense Treaty, EDCA, and joint training, the Philippines is no longer standing alone. Behind its small fleet stand the navies of the US, Japan, Australia, India, and even partners from Europe. A strike here risks a coalition response, not just a local fight. And finally, the resilience. From guerrillas fighting Spain, to resistance against Japan, to court battles at The Hague, Filipinos have never surrendered. That willpower, now armed with modern missiles and global support, is not easy to break. This is the constant truth. A smaller nation, smartly armed and tightly allied, can deter even a superpower. Survival has never been about size. It is about will. From 1898 to 2025, every would-be conqueror has faced the same lesson. So ask yourself, can determination and strategy outweigh raw numbers? History strongly suggests the answer is yes. The story of the Philippines proves one clear truth. Strength is not always about size. A small nation of islands has turned its geography into a natural shield, its alliances into powerful support, and its people's resilience into an unbreakable force. With modern frigates, BrahMos missiles, and partners like the United States, Japan, and Australia, the Philippines is no longer standing alone. For China, this means every step in the South China Sea carries enormous risk, military, economic, and diplomatic. But the greatest strength of all is the Filipino spirit. From resistance against Spain and Japan to standing firm at The Hague, Filipinos have always refused to be broken. That same spirit now fuels their defense in 2025. Subscribe for more deep dives into Asia's power struggles. And tell us, could China really win against the Philippines? Or would history repeat itself?